Very excited for our next session and presentation. We have, over the past couple of years, we have always had somewhat of a gap on this program, and I'm willing to admit that, especially from, I should say, the benefits from what employees want out of their workplaces, and ultimately how that correlates to this show. So we have always had quite a little bit of a gap there, and I'm very, very excited to introduce Rachel Druckenmiller, the Director of Wellbeing with the Alera Group. She will be speaking on the, beyond benefits in broccoli, what employees really want from work. Rachel is an outstanding speaker. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn, please do. Her videos are fantastic, and she speaks and is always traveling at all points in time of the year. So Rachel Druckenmiller is the Director of Wellbeing for Alera Group, a national benefits consulting firm that supports companies to position themselves as employees of choice. Rachel is a catalyst who unleashes possibilities in people and organizations. With over 13 years of experience in the well-being field, she's on a mission to rehumanize the workplace and foster thriving workplace cultures rooted in kindness, compassion, connection, and well-being. She trains leadership teams how to be better humans that are self-aware, intentional, and connected, and women's leadership groups. She has worked with Under Armour, Deloitte, and T. Rowe Price, among others. In 2015, Rachel was named the #1 health promotion professional in the United States by the Wellness Council of America. She was selected by Employ Humanity as one of 7 wellness leaders making a positive impact in 2018. Because of her passion for women's health and leadership, Rachel is a founding member of Global Women for Wellbeing, a nonprofit committed to giving women voice in their workplaces and communities. Please give a warm welcome to Rachel Druckenmiller.
Thank you. Thanks. It's really interesting as a speaker when you come into environments like this where you don't know a lot of people. It's really convenient when the opening keynote tees you up, which is basically what happened to me this morning. So one of the things that Don mentioned in his presentation is actually the entire crux of what I'm going to be going through today. So that was really fantastic that you did that for me, totally unrehearsed, but thank you. So what do employees really want from work? A lot of what we're focusing on here is looking at the environment, and that is critical, right? All of you know this. I'm not the expert on the space design aspect of things. But I know that having spaces that support human beings is really important. It's a crucial element of having workplaces that people want to go, where people are engaged and dialed in and feel connected, that you can use space to foster connection and collaboration. And that is so critical. But I think one of the other things that's important to mention here is that we distinguish between climate and culture. So a lot of when we're thinking about climate, we're thinking about things on the surface. We're looking at the perks and the programs and the policies, things like that, right? All the things you can walk into an office, you're like, whoa, this is so cool. And then you ask them, how's the culture here? And on the side, sometimes they're like, it sucks. But we have a really cool office. And so when we're talking about culture, which is what I'm going to dig into today, we're looking at the shared experiences, values, and beliefs that underlie an organization. So this is the underlying current that is directing the organization and the people there where to go. Experiences, beliefs, and values. That is culture. Both of them. We need both. We need a healthy and thriving climate, and we need a healthy and thriving culture. And I'm going to really dial into the culture aspect of this today. We know that what we're currently doing at work isn't working, because we know according to Gallup, about 2/3 of employees are disengaged at work. To add to that, work is actually killing us. So there's a professor out of Stanford University named Jeffrey Pfeffer who wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck. Has anyone read this book out of curiosity? Fantastic book, really shocking numbers in there. It's called Dying for a Paycheck. His name's Jeffrey Pfeffer. And one of the things they found in their research is that the mismanagement of the workforce is responsible for up to 120,000 deaths a year, due to things like excessive work hours, work-family conflict, lack of autonomy and control, lack of health insurance, that all of these things are driving people to literally be sick at work. To add to that, we know that the war on talent is heating up. We know that it is such a challenge to retain and to recruit and engage and retain top talents and to have people perform at the highest level. And so organizations are trying to figure out, like, what's the secret? Like, how do I get the best people? How do I keep them? And how do I get them to perform at a really high level? Yes? We're trying to figure out how to do this. And so the organizations that have figured this out understand that culture is a competitive advantage. And they know that great cultures attract great employees and great clients and great customers. And I flew here yesterday from Baltimore on Southwest Airlines. I don't fly because of the first-class seating and the awesome food, right? Like, I fly because they sing songs to me, and because when I get off the plane, they tell me to be kind to people, because they treat me well. That's one of the reasons why I'm loyal to that brand. One of the things I want to emphasize as we're going through this conversation today is that your culture happens by design or by default. Just like you either intentionally design your space or it defaults to whatever it is, and if you're not intentionally designing your culture, it will go into default mode. And you'll probably end up with something that you don't actually want, that's not really working. So your culture happens by design or by default. The other thing that's true is that culture is often relegated to HR, but it should not be. It's no longer just an HR thing. It's a business thing, it's an everybody thing. Everyone in this room is responsible for helping to shape the culture at your organization, regardless of your role. We can't like tap out and be like, that's not my job. Culture is everyone's job. Everyone's responsible for shaping whether or not people are engaged and connected and drawing in good talent and making sure people are trained and mentored and coached. These things are everyone's responsibility. So we have to take that on and recognize that it's our job to do that. We're going to explore for a moment the impact of a great culture from like the business side of things. Some stats for you guys. But starting off, this is not true of like actual today, but I want you to think about a day where you had a really bad day at work. Can you think about this? You had like a really crappy day at work. Like maybe you cried. I've had these moments, I'm like sitting in my car and I'm crying, or you're just like angry at the world, or you go right to the bar, whatever it is. We all have our coping mechanisms. And you do your thing because you had a really, really bad day at work. I want you to then think about what happened when you got home that day, or the next time you had to interact with somebody. I'm going to guess that you probably were not the most patient spouse and the best parent ever, or a really great friend, or you were probably checking your phone when you were in the checkout line at Target instead of talking to the person who was helping you. There's a ripple effect to negative workplace cultures. This is not just a work thing, this is a societal thing. Because it affects, when work is not working, it affects every aspect of our lives. It has a ripple effect. When we're stressed and going through difficult things at work, it affects our marriages, it affects our friendships, it affects our children, it affects our health and well-being, like it affects our finances, it affects everything. We have to recognize that we have an impact on other people. That the way we treat people in our care affects the way they go home and treat people in their care. It's a responsibility for us to care about the people that work for us. Because they have other people in their lives that they love and care about that are depending on them to be well and to be happy and to be fulfilled. And we can all think of situations at work where this wasn't true for us, where we felt like we weren't cared about, and then we went home and then we were uncaring towards someone else. Can you think of a situation where you had that happen? Yeah. You have a toxic boss, perhaps. I burned out 2 years ago. I totally burned out. I got mono. It's called Epstein-Barr virus. It's an acute form of mono. I totally burned out. And my husband got like the leftovers, the absolute leftovers. And I was like, this is not who I want to be. This is not who I am. And so we have to recognize that the way that we are showing up at work is affecting the health and well-being and the families of other people. This is non-negotiable. Employees expect you to care about them. They expect you to care about them in multiple areas. They expect you to care about their career, their learning and development, and their growth. They expect you to care about them from a financial standpoint. So whether it's paying down student loan debt, which we know is like astronomical right now, or whether it's helping someone to save for retirement or to buy their first home or to send a kid to college, people are really struggling with finances. the emotional and mental health side of things. The millennial generation is called the anxious generation. We have an epidemic of depression and anxiety and other mental health crises that are affecting how people show up at work. Social is we want to give people opportunities to just be with each other and to just have fun and to connect and to laugh and to get to know the soul behind the role. And then the physical aspect of things, this is what we've talked a lot about. So much of the work that you're doing is focused on the physical side, and that is critical. In addition to teaching people how to eat well and move more and sleep better, all that kind of stuff, that's all the physical aspect of life that people expect you to care about. And the last is community, is what are you doing to support the community in which you live and work? Employees expect you to care about them as a whole person, that all of these things matter to them, and they're looking for organizations that care about them in all of these ways, that provide resources and tools and support in all of these areas. When employees believe their employer cares about their health and well-being, they're 38% more engaged. They're 10 times less likely to be hostile. Anybody ever worked with a hostile employee that you're like, oh my gosh, I would like fewer hostile people? Yeah. 17% more likely to still be working there in 1 year, 28% more likely to recommend their workplace, and 18% more likely to go the extra mile. So this is about engagement, morale, retention, recruitment, and performance. When people feel like you care about them, isn't it funny we have to have like a business case for caring? Like think about someone in your life that cares about you. Do you need like numbers behind that? You just feel it. You feel it when someone cares about you. There was a study done by Quantum Workplace. They are the back end of the best place to work surveys. And so they have data from 8,000 employers that include 600,000 employees. So humongous data set. And they whittled that down and they found that there were 5 key drivers of employee engagement. Number 1 is my job allows me to utilize my strengths. I get to do what I'm good at work. That's really important to people. The second thing is I trust the senior leadership team to lead the company to future success. People want to be part of an organization that's going somewhere. I believe this organization will be successful in the future. The leaders of this organization value people as their most important resource, so that we are people first, that we care about people. And number 5, if I contribute to the organization's success, I know I will be recognized. Aside from having a bad boss, the second most common reason that people leave an organization is because they don't feel like anyone appreciates them. Raise your hand if you've ever worked at a company where you did not feel valued. You didn't feel like they saw your full potential. You felt like they didn't recognize the good work that you were doing. Yeah. It's really demoralizing to feel that way. And so these are some of the reasons when people don't have these things, these are some of the reasons why they are leaving organizations. There was a question earlier about generational things in the workplace and how can we address that, because we have all these different generations and how do we address them? And generally speaking, my stance on that is focus on what all human beings have in common first, because we have more in common than we are different. And if we could just focus on that stuff to begin with, which I'll dig into today, we wouldn't have to have so much of these nuanced conversations about the generations. The IBM Institute for Business Value did a survey where they looked at the 3 primary generations in the workforce, millennials, Gen X, and boomers, and they found that, guess what? Generally speaking, we all want the same things. Shocker, right? Like, we want to make an impact. We want to be part of solving a social problem. We want to work with a diverse group of people. We want to do work we're passionate about. We want work-life balance. Like, these are the things that matter. Yes, there's nuances, but it's probably not because you were born in 1962 versus 1989. It's probably because of the stage of life that you're in. And this is where Don did my tee-up today. So he put that article up. He said, this is a really great article about Facebook where they talk about these 3 things that employees want. So this is a chart from that study that looked at Facebook surveys their employees twice a year, and they look at what are the key motivators of their employees. And they look through hundreds of thousands of answers, and they whittled it down to 3 buckets: cause, community, and career. The people want to be part of an organization that gives them these 3 things, and it's the combination that's most powerful, not necessarily having one of these things or the other, but it's the combination that they found that is most powerful. And when we give employees these things, they will be engaged. And when we don't give them these things, they will be more likely to be dissatisfied, disengaged, and struggle with their performance. So these are the things that employees want, and these are the things we're going to dig into today. The first is community. So Quantum Workplace, again, did another study that included 14,000 people. And they asked people, they said, what is the single most important thing, aside from pay and benefits, that makes a great workplace? And the response that was given 2.5 times more than any other response was relationships with my coworkers. That was the most important thing. So we are hardwired for connection. We are built for community. We're built to connect with people. And so what I'm going to have you guys do, you have a card that says, help, Rachel needs your input. And because there is so much collective wisdom and insight and ideas in this room that we can't feasibly tap into in a brief keynote, I wanted you guys to have the opportunity to share what's something cool that you do at your company to foster connection and community. So if you'll just jot that down on the card, and what I'll do afterwards, I know you're just getting to know me. I will not spam you. I really just want to help you because I care about this so deeply. If you put your name and email address in the back, we'll compile all of the answers from everybody and send them out to you so that you have the collective wisdom of the room and ideas from everyone about what they're doing to foster connection and community. So I'm going to give you about just over a minute or so, minute and a half or so to do that. So if you'll jot down something that your organization does. Okay, great. So if something comes to you during the session, feel free to jot it down. But when we're finished, I'll just have you all put them in the middle of the table, and I'll get them. I'll be around at lunch, too, so I'm happy to chat with people. But I just wanted to have an opportunity to capture that. As we know, we live in a digital age. And I think that we are more digitally connected than we've ever been. But we're also more intimately disconnected than we've been. And this is something that's affecting people throughout workplaces, in our communities, in our families, in our friend groups. Like, we are in a state of disconnection. We are more inclined to be looking at our phones than to be doing anything else. And interestingly, there was a study done that found that the mere presence of a cell phone stifles interpersonal closeness and trust, and that we actually experience a drop in empathy when we are with someone and they have their cell phone out. This also applies to the watch, by the way, when you're like, I'm not distracted. We know people that do this. They look at their watch every 5 seconds when it vibrates. They're like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm paying attention. No, you're not. You have a buzzer, take it off, unless you're closing the hole in the ozone layer or curing cancer. Take it off for an hour. I'm sure that if someone needs to reach you, that they'll figure it out. So again, we have this illusion of connection. Again, I use social media as much as anybody else. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I use them all too. I'm not shaming social media, but we have to make a conscious effort now to truly engage with people in a one-on-one setting. So one of the things I do for my job is I interview CEOs of clients of ours. And so I was interviewing the CEO of a publicly traded company in the property management space. And their HR team handed him off to me, and they were like, this guy's kind of a jerk, good luck. I was like, thank you. I'm so excited to talk to him. And so I asked him a series of questions about his background and his story and where he came from, and I come to find out that his father was actually an orphan. So his father was raised in an orphanage, and he developed this really strong work ethic and moved his way up to middle management position at a manufacturing firm. And he instilled a really strong work ethic in the man that I was now talking to. And so what I found out from him is that he lived in the Midwest, but he had this job opportunity for this executive position on the East Coast. And so he decided to uproot his entire family to move from the Midwest to the East Coast for this job. And he used to coach the Pee Wee football team, and they went to the championships, and he was super dialed into his community. And he left all of that for this job. And so I asked him a question that I would encourage you to ask yourself about your personal life, professional, whenever you're feeling stuck in any way, working on a project. It's like a money question, and it's so simple. If it were just right, what would it look like? If it were just right, what would it look like? And I asked him, I said, if your life, if things were just right, what would it look like? And I wasn't expecting what he said next. He said, in a perfect world, it would be nice to have personal friendships in Maryland. He was 65 years old, and he was lonely. He wasn't a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. He was alone. He just wanted friends. And I interviewed him a year later, and I asked him how things were going with that social well-being side of things. And he said, oh, they're a little better, but I'm still in the witness protection program. I was like, okay. But the fact of the matter is, like, he's not alone in this. When we look at things that affect early death the most, we have things like air pollution, increases the risk of dying early, obesity, excessive drinking. So I was in Vegas last week speaking at a conference. I was like, this is pretty much Las Vegas. But the last thing is one that most people don't expect, that has a greater impact on early death than all of this is loneliness. Increased risk of dying early, 45% if we are living with loneliness. And we have people that are trying to be louder than ever on social media, are they not? Because they feel so alone. They are surrounded by people all the time, yet so alone in a crowd. This is something that is affecting so many people, and there's such shame around it. People don't feel like they can say, I'm lonely. They think it's like a knock on their character if they can't make friends or something. And so they don't talk about it, and they live in shame. They live with depression and anxiety. And you have people that are working for you that are feeling this way, and you may be someone who is feeling this way. When I burned out, I really struggled with that. I was like, man, I've been a really bad friend. I've been so focused on my job at the expense of everything else that I've not been a present friend. I've not been dialed in. And so it's really important that we're conscious of this, that we're making efforts to do something about it. This affects men and women. Men tend to experience loneliness at work more than women. And in the generations, the younger generation tends to experience loneliness more than the older generation. But it affects everybody. Loneliness affects everyone. We crave connection. We want to feel like we belong to something. We want to feel like we're a part of something, like we are hardwired as humans to connect. Like, you exist because people connected. Not to be weird, but like you do. Like, you exist because two people connected. You came into the world connected to another person. Like, it is in our very nature to be connected to each other. Yet we have disconnected in so many ways. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to connect with a neighbor in just a moment. And I'm actually going to ask you to take out your cell phones, and then I'm going to ask you to put them away. But what you're going to do is we're going to do an activity called the Inside Scoop. So this was started by the US Surgeon General's office several years ago. And it's a really neat activity that you can do at the start of a staff meeting or department meeting. And what it does is it gives you the opportunity to connect with another person. When you do it the actual way, the person has 5 minutes, and they share through pictures something about their life for 5 minutes. They get the floor for 5 minutes. Nobody one-upping them, but they get to talk for 5 minutes, and they get to be seen. Do you know that's what we all want? At the end of the day, we want to be seen and heard and feel like we matter. That's what everybody wants. Man, if we could do a better job at that, we wouldn't have to be focused on all these other things to try to fix people, because we know what they want and what they need. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn to a neighbor. We're going to do an abbreviated version of this. So you're going to have about a minute each, and at the midpoint mark, I'm going to say switch, switch, switch 3 times, because people usually miss it the first time because they're so connected to their buddy. And then you're going to share through pictures on your phone something about your life that you would want someone else to know. So I want you to, when I say go, you're going to find a buddy, and you're going to start. And the first person's going to start, and then I'll tell you to switch. Make sense? Go. Switch, switch, switch. Okay, and stop. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Thank you. What did you notice about the energy in the room? Got warmed up, right? Like, yeah, I mean, we love talking about ourselves, right? Now, I always like to ask, did anyone like learn something new or have an interesting kind of connection with the person that you were talking to that you'd want to share that you thought was just like particularly interesting? Yes?
From a TEDx who was experiencing his sister speak, and he showed me a picture of her daughter who was 2, and I also have a 2-year-old daughter.
Ah.
He shared photos of his niece and my daughter.
Okay, so you both have 2-year-old daughters, so like, how about that? That's pretty cool, right? Something in common. You're like, oh, I totally know your pain right now, right? Anybody else have something that you're like, I really have to share this? Yes?
We found this out yesterday, but Laura is getting married on November the 30th, same day my daughter is getting married.
Oh, wow. So is it Mara? Is getting married the same day as, what's your name?
My daughter,
As your daughter, what's your name?
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle. Okay, wonderful. So isn't that cool? Like, what are the odds of that, of all the days in the year, that would happen? You know, it's fascinating. One of the times I've done this before, and the 2 people matched up were both adoptive parents. So that happened in a room of 200 people that didn't know each other. And then most recently, and this is a little bit, the woman came up to me afterwards. She said, I just have to tell you what happened with my person and me. And apparently the woman she was talking to had lost her grandson very tragically at the age of 3 to a drowning incident. And the woman she was talking to, the woman who came up to me to tell me this story, said, I work for a company that does organ and tissue donation. And her grandson's organs had been donated. And she said they had this like immediate, I mean, how quickly would you be able to get to connect to someone like that in 2 minutes? But they had this thing in common that was just so amazing. She said, I want to meet the family. I mean, it was just this magical connection that they had. And how often do we take time during our day to use our phone for good? I would encourage you to do that activity at lunch, or at a time where you're sitting with someone you don't know. Say, hey, I want to learn about you. Show me some things about your life through pictures. It's a very easy thing that you can put at the front of a meeting, right? Department meetings, anybody can do. It's free. People usually like free stuff. So it's something that anyone could do. It's totally scalable, but I would encourage you to give that activity a try. And the reason this matters, it matters for a number of reasons. But one, if you've ever struggled with trust at your organization. Anyone ever struggle with trust? Everyone's got that figured out? Okay. Yeah, so the reason this matters is because connection and time together build trust. That's why social stuff isn't fluffy. These people are like, what's the ROI on like the happy hour? I'm like, ugh. People connected to each other and then they're going to work better together? I don't know. It's hard to trust someone you don't know, right? It's really hard to trust somebody you don't know. So this is why opportunities to connect are so important. And there's so many things we can do. We can bring people together through food. And now, of course, if you're at a large organization, it's like, Rachel, how do we scale this? Everyone doesn't work you don't have 5,000 people that all work in one space, most likely, and you have departments and teams, and people can scale this stuff. People love food. People at your company love food. Like, oh my gosh. It's like, if people are like, I'm busy, and you're like, we've got free food. You're like, I'm suddenly free. And then everyone comes out of the woodwork. So we love to do potlucks, Taco Tuesday, brunch. People love breakfast food. So like brunch potlucks. Coming up Cinco de Mayo, you could do like a guac-off. If you have anybody that's like really good at making guacamole, you could like have a guacamole contest. I mean, chili cook-offs, really fun. People love to bring together international, or you can have people kind of bring food from their, their heritage. All sorts of ways you can bring people together. Using your space, again, to foster connection, whether it's doing like a paint night. We've done cake decorating, which people were super into. You could do game nights, escape rooms, go to escape room. Anybody else here like escape rooms? I'm like super nerdy. Yes, a lot. Oh, you're my people. My husband and I have a problem. We've literally done about 35 of these in the past year and a half. Nerd moment, but that's what we like to do. Like, I loved reading Nancy Drew growing up, and like he loves James Bond, so we get to like live out our childhood dreams in escape rooms. And then like axe throwing is another thing. Anyone been axe throwing? Yeah, like combined with a happy hour is like, that's like a lawsuit waiting to happen, but people do it and it works, so you could do that. And then giving back together, bringing people together to serve the community, to serve and to give back and to contribute to a greater purpose. This is, again, just a few ways that we can bring people together. You can use technology, of course. So we use an app that we love. It's a scavenger hunt app. It's a virtual scavenger hunt, and it's called Scavify. And they also have an onboarding platform that companies like ExxonMobil use. And so it's a way to gamify the onboarding process and to create a virtual scavenger hunt. And we have our 4th annual one coming up, and people absolutely love this thing. Absolutely love it. You can also talk to your existing partners and ask them what collaboration tools they have built in to the products that you're already using. So Slack, for instance, has an extension called Donut that allows people to do one-on-one matchups with each other, random matchups where you talk about anything other than work. And so it's a way, if you have a dispersed workforce, you have people that are not in the same space, that you can get them an opportunity to kind of get to know each other in a virtual setting. So it's called Donut, and it's an extension on Slack. Here's the bottom line. We're going to come back to this again and again today. Employees leave companies. They don't leave communities. Are you building a community or just a place where people show up to come work? Because it's harder to leave a community. If you've had a best friend at work, anyone had a best friend at work, like a really good friend at work? Hard to leave, right? It would be really hard to leave because you're not just leaving the paycheck and all the other stuff, the cool space. You're leaving a relationship. And it's harder to do that. Gallup has told us that employees with a best friend at work are 7 times more likely to be engaged in the workplace. 7 times more likely to be engaged when you have a best friend at work. So that is community, connection, belonging. We all want this, to feel cared about. Career. We all want to feel like our organization is giving us opportunities to learn and to grow and to develop. So I want you to think about, for your company, how are leaders at your organization equipped to lead effectively? Most of today's leaders are not equipped to lead today's workforce. They're equipped to lead the workforce from 20 years ago. Command and control, that's not how it's going to work anymore. We're in the purpose economy. We're not like in the Industrial Revolution anymore, right? So we have to lead people differently. I love what Richard Branson has to say about this, that train people well enough so they can lead, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. That's what a lot of organizations are missing. Like, oh, if I pay for this training, they might leave. Yeah, well, do you want them to stay and like not be qualified? I mean, we know those people. We work with some of them. We're like, someone would just train this person. Things would be so much better. People want to be developed, coached, and mentored. They don't want to be managed. This is a shift in the workplace, is that people want to be, right, developed and coached and mentored. This idea of like, I am your boss, do as I say, people aren't up for that anymore. Like, for the most part, some industries, it's not necessarily much of an option, but truly, like, people want to have a sense of autonomy, and they want to feel supported, and they want to be treated like adults. Adults want to be treated like adults. We know that leaders are the ones that set the stage for this. Managers account for 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores, 70%. They're often the ones driving whether or not employees are engaged or not. If you have a great manager, higher likelihood people are going to be engaged. If you have a bad manager, probably more likely that people are going to be disengaged. So we know this intuitively, and so what we have to understand is that we have to focus more on bringing human skills to the workplace. Technical skills are becoming table stakes. But yeah, you have to be technically good at what you do, like, yeah, in order to get this job. But skills like empathy and conflict resolution and collaboration and critical thinking, people that are really good listeners, you know that's a skill to know how to listen? You know somebody who doesn't have that skill? Like, a lot of people don't have that skill. A lot of us don't. We're so like focused all the time on everything else but the person in front of us that we don't actually listen. We have dueling monologues, which is not an effective way to communicate. So we've got to focus on training up human leaders with human skills. There was a study done of over 50,000 managers, and they looked at 2 particular aspects of leadership, 2 traits that tend to be true of leaders. They tend to have warmth and they tend to have competence. But at the highest level of leadership, warmth is a greater indicator of leadership effectiveness than competence. Warmth means things like, I listen well, and I'm present, and I'm accessible, and I'm available, and I smile at you when I see you, and I know your name, and when you do something well, I recognize you. This is not like rocket science, but these are the things that people want from a leader. And most leaders are not very good at doing this. And we know that at the top level of leadership, this is most important. So among the C-suite and senior management, warmth is a greater indicator of leadership effectiveness than competence. We notice that competence becomes more important for middle management and supervisors, but warmth is still responsible for 30 to 40% of effectiveness. So at every level, it matters whether or not you act like you care, even if you're faking it. And some people might have to. It might not be in their nature to necessarily do this. But we have to focus on being leaders who lead with human skills. And one of the ways that we can lead with a human skill is by focusing on people's strengths. Remember the number one thing, the number one driver of employee engagement? Is I get to do what? I get to use my strengths. I get to do what I'm good at, right? So your risk of being actively disengaged, which I want you to think about this person. Someone who's actively disengaged, they're at work, but they are checked out and they want everyone else to know it. Have you met this person before? Like they're there and they're like, I'm gonna tick everybody off today. And like they're just kind of doing it and they're just toxic and they're just like, the poison in the water. Your risk of being actively disengaged is contingent on your manager and the extent to which they focus on your strengths. If your manager focuses, bless you, if your manager focuses on your strength, there is a 1% chance that you will be actively disengaged at work. 1%. If your manager focuses on your weaknesses, there's a 22% chance that you will be actively disengaged at work. What do you think is worse than having someone focus on your weaknesses? You're a smart group. Not focused at all. In other words, ignoring you. If your manager ignores you, there's a 40% chance that you will be actively disengaged at work. Anyone have young kids? Anyone ever been a young kid? So, you know the kid that's like, mommy, 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 like they're pulling on your leg, mommy, mommy, and then you're like, what? And they're like, oh, okay. I want you to think about your problem children at work. Maybe they're not being that to spite you. Maybe they just feel ignored. Maybe they don't feel seen. Maybe they're really struggling at home, and they just want someone to notice something that they do well. Maybe a difficult employee is just an employee who doesn't feel safe, not one who's just trying to be a jerk. And there's a health consequence to this too, because the people who are ignored, they're twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression in the next 12 months. So when we look at things like claims data, if you're a large organization, you have access to claims data, how often when we look at depression metrics are we ever asking any questions about who is managing that person? Is there a manager who has like a lot of people that are struggling with depression and anxiety or hypertension? Like, that would be helpful to know, so that person could possibly be course corrected. So if you haven't already, raise your hand if you've taken the StrengthsFinder assessment. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to take this assessment to really get clear on what your strengths are and how to language them. The book's like less than $20, has a free code in the back. Take it. You can bring in a Gallup certified strengths coach to your organization and they can do training around this for leaders. StrengthsFinder. The other piece to this is that all employees, again, they want to be seen. And one of the things organizations are not doing well when it comes to career is to making people feel valued and appreciated. Next to physical survival, the greatest need of a human being is psychological survival. To be understood, to be affirmed, to be validated, and to be appreciated. We're not doing this well. And it's one of the reasons why people are disengaged. It's one of the primary reasons people are disengaged at work. It doesn't take much either. I mean, I can say thank you for something that you did well. It takes like seconds to recognize somebody, but we're just not doing it. There's a platform that you can use that does this. I like to introduce you guys to tools that make these things scalable. So there's a tool called Kazoo HR. It used to be called You Earned It, but they merged with another company. And there's an accounting firm that I'm actually speaking at their employee meeting in San Francisco in June, and they use this. They have over 500 employees. They're recognized as a top workplace, and they say this tool has been a game changer for them. And it's called Kazoo HR. It's a recognition and rewards platform that also has continuous feedback improvement and pulse surveys. So it kind of combines all of these things into one, and it gives people a shared platform, a shared space for how to recognize each other. It allows you, remember we talked about experiences, beliefs, and values, that underlying current of culture? This is one of the ways that you can make gratitude a value at your organization by saying, we're investing in this. It's something we're going to intentionally focus on doing. Again, employees leave companies, they don't leave communities. They don't leave communities where they feel like they are developed and coached and mentored. They don't leave communities where they feel like someone sees their strengths and leverages that. And they don't leave communities where they feel appreciated and seen and heard and valued. They don't. At least not as readily. And so we know that if we're going to focus on designing a workplace where people come first, that we have to recognize that people want to be part of a community. And the last piece is cause. People want to be part of an organization that, again, they see has a future and that stands for something. People want to be part of a company that they're proud to work for. So think about it. Why does your company exist aside from making money? Do the people that work for you know? Why do you exist besides making money? How did you come to be? What's your story? What's your founder's story? What need did you meet? What gap did you fill? Why do you exist? And how effectively do you communicate that to the people that work with and for you? Tell your stories. Most organizations don't do this very effectively. They don't tell the stories of their employees. They don't tell the stories of their clients and customers. They don't tell stories of impact. But that's why people are going to want to work with you. We can use numbers all day long, but the universal language of all human beings is storytelling. We have been telling stories for way longer than we've been using data. And we know that it's what engages people, our stories. Great cultures are rooted in great stories. There's a really cool company that I found out about that's based in Chicago, actually, and they are called Skill Scout. And they're workplace filmmakers, and what they do is they have like this DIY aspect of their work, because usually it can be really expensive to hire a film crew to like come out and film your people doing stuff. So they will actually send you a kit that allows you to do like what looks like a professionally shot DIY video of different things at your company that you might use for marketing purposes, that you can use for job descriptions and job postings, that you can use to capture some aspect of your culture, your give back, something cool that you do that you want to promote on social media, that they will take all of like the B-roll and all the footage you send them and they'll compress it into like a 2 to 3 minute really slick video. So the CEO's name is Elena Valentine. She's fantastic. If any of the things I'm mentioning, if you want an introduction, you can write that in your card. I will happily make an introduction to her for you. And the reason why we're focused on video when it comes to storytelling and why we're focused on employee-generated content is because content generated by employees receives 8 times more engagement than something that you create from your brand channel, from a marketing side. Is that when you see an employee, because think about it, you're like a mini celebrity, right? If you're like an employee in a large organization, you're on the video, aren't you sharing that with everybody you know? Much more so than if like your company just says, share this video. I mean, so we know that employees are more inclined to share content that has them featured in it. And we know that video is the way of the future, that we have the attention span of a goldfish, and we need to give people the opportunity to watch these quick videos and to be engaged. So they've worked with lots of brands that you're familiar with. They've worked with all sorts of different organizations. I just think what they do is cool. That's what I like to do. I like to curate people that I think are doing cool stuff, and then I like to tell people about it. So that's kind of why I'm telling you guys this. And again, they use employees. This might be a setup that they would have you do. They have you use employees as storytellers. So think about it. What are you doing in your organization to tell your story effectively? I have a series of questions I can send you as well. I didn't think to mention this before, but that will help you kind of get at that. What is your story? If that's of interest to you, you can write story on the paper. I'll send it to you. But I want to close with one story that has really shaped our organization. So this is Baltimore. This is not the Homicide or the Wire version of Baltimore, which I know my city has such a good reputation, but our CEO, he's from Baltimore. His grandfather's from Baltimore, and he was a lawyer. His grandfather was a lawyer, and he instilled in our CEO, Richard, he said, if you take care of Baltimore, Baltimore will take care of you. And so this is the way that he lives and practices business, that if we want to take care of people, we want to make people feel like we care about them. And so he was watching a story on the news one day of a wealthy man in Pittsburgh, who was going out around the holidays and just giving $100 bills to strangers, just to pay it forward, to be like Secret Santa. And these people were just like, oh my gosh, like so overwhelmed, incredible, incredible stories. And so Richard saw the video, and he said, oh, I want to do that. And so he got $100 out of the bank, and he went to a place that he goes very frequently, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where he has struck up an uncommon friendship with a guy named Scotty, who's a homeless Vietnam vet, who's like the mayor of the Starbucks at Rehoboth Beach. Like, hangs out in the corner. Everybody knows who Scotty is. He just kind of sits there and does his thing. And so Richard decided that he wanted to give him $100. And Scotty was overcome with emotion. You know the first thing he wanted to do is he wanted to give it away. He said, I want to take my buddies out to dinner. He's homeless. And the first thing he wanted to do was give away the money. And so Richard was so impacted by this that he came to us at our final all-hands meeting of the year, a couple weeks later, and he said, I want all of you to have the opportunity to experience what I got to experience in that moment. And with that, he pulled out an envelope with $100 bills and a handwritten thank you note for each person in the room. And he said, I want you to pay it forward however you see fit. So you could hear the stories started coming in within a few hours. The cleaning crew at our office hit the jackpot. Like, they had a good day. you know, the daycare provider, the clerk at like the convenience shop who knew this woman's bagel order. Like, there were all sorts of things that people were doing to pay it forward, like immediately. And I was trying to figure out, what should I do with my $100? So it was Christmas Eve at my church, and I had this nudge. You know that nudge, you feel a nudge, you're like, go, it's like, go do this. And you're like, I don't know. And I decided to heed it. And so there's a family at our church that's two parents that are basically on 2 teacher salaries, and they have 3 young kids. And so I decided I wanted to give the money to them, and I pulled them aside after the service, and I told them the story, and I gave them the $100, and the wife's eyes began to well up with tears. And she said, we just took our car to the shop, and we didn't know how we were going to pay for it. And so I texted my CEO, and I told him what happened. He goes, give him another 100. I don't just like carry these around, dude. Like, so I get another $100 from him the next week, and then I go back to church the following week. And I walked up to them again, and I said, hey, I know I just did this last week. I was like, but my boss wanted me to give you another $100. And they were like, who do you work for? So this is what it's about to tell a story. And I wrote a post on LinkedIn, and it got shared by thousands of people because people want to be aligned with organizations that stand for something and that make an impact in the world. And that's what we had the opportunity to do. So when you think about your organization, what are you doing to not just be a company that employs people, but to be a community where people feel a sense of connection and belonging and care, where they feel supported to grow and to show up as their best selves, and where they get to make a contribution that has an impact in the world. These are the 3 things that all employees want. They want community, they want career, and they want to rally behind a cause. And if you give them those things, and if you focus on those things, you will have people that won't want to leave you, and people that can't wait to work for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Sure. Yeah.
How different companies are really making strides to keep people connected when they can be even 10 times harder to connect, right?
Yeah, so how do we deal with this with remote workers? Yeah, I mean, I think using the tools, using the extensions like a Slack, using like a workplace by Facebook, like using something, we have a secret group within Facebook where we just have like our own team page and people talk and they share different things. I think using video, so we have a client that's an engineering firm that has about almost 2,000 employees, that they're spread out over dozens of locations. Their mascot is the buffalo, so they have a video newsletter that comes out on a weekly basis called The Herd. And what they do is they feature different people in the organization, and what they do is they kind of share updates and they share pictures. They have buffalo as their mascot, and they have people take this little stuffed buffalo around their vacations with them with their families. And then they submit these pictures, so they get like, it's a way to access people and to kind of see what people are doing. So I think video newsletters that are generated by the organization, I think can be powerful as a way to connect and get to know people. I think, again, to the extent to which you can have meetups that are local, so if there is a contingency of people in a particular city or around a certain region that you might, just like an alumni network would at a college, that you would like arrange some type of event so people have the opportunity to come together. And the extent to which, I know it can be an expense, but the extent to which you can bring even pockets of people together, even on an annual basis, to just see each other, I think that has significant impact. And then of course, just like using Zoom, like using whenever, to the ever extent possible, to use video, and then to ask them. I'm a big fan of asking people. Like if you're struggling with something, like if it were just right, what would it look like for you to feel more connected to this organization, even though you live here and we're based here? I'm a big advocate of asking people questions like that because I think people are very good at solving their own problems, and often we don't give them that opportunity. Is that a little helpful? Okay, yeah. And I'll be here at lunch, so if anyone wants to chat, I'm happy to chat with anyone at lunch. So thanks again.